Hey guys, today's video is about a topic which has garnered some attention within the fitness space, and that is fatigue. Feeling drained or tired during workouts, is that as important as everyone makes it seem? If you do a set of 12 on bicep curls, does it mean that you can't do another set for the next month? Maybe, let's find out. Fatigue isn't just about being tired, however, it's also a physiological and psychological phenomenon. In this video, I'll go over the science of fatigue, exploring its causes, effects on performance, and some strategies for management. Start things off, what is fatigue? The short answer is plain and simple, when you feel exhausted or tired. But the longer answer is that it's the body's response to prolonged physical or mental activity, which, as we know, leads to a decline in performance as well as an increased perception of effort. It's also comprised of a central brain and nervous system and a peripheral muscular component. Physiological mechanisms behind it. There are three main ones you need to know. Some you might have heard of already. The first and most obvious one is energy depletion. When you do an activity, for example a set, for an extended amount of time, it depletes your body's glycogen stores, reducing energy availability. The second one is metabolite accumulation, which is the buildup of byproducts such as lactate, which is known to impair muscle function. And finally is neuromuscular factors. Altered neural drive also affects muscle activation. When fatigue is mentioned, one of the most misunderstood aspects is what's happening inside the muscle, particularly the role of metabolites and calcium ions in muscular fatigue and force production. Starting off with metabolite accumulation. During intense exercise, the body breaks down ATP to generate energy, as we all know, and this process results in several byproducts being produced. The first is inorganic phosphate, and this builds up rapidly during contractions, and it also interferes with cross-bridge cycling. The second byproduct is hydrogen ions. As you probably know, a great amount of hydrogen ions leads to a drop in pH, which is exactly what happens here as well, which also reduces the sensitivity of contractile proteins to calcium. Lastly, as mentioned previously, it's lactate. It's often misunderstood, however, it's not the villain. It actually helps buffer acidosis, but it is a marker of glycolytic stress. Altogether, this trifecta does three main things. The first is that it impairs calcium release and the reuptake of calcium in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The second is that it disrupts cross-bridge formation and actin-myosin coupling. And lastly, it slows down ATP regeneration. Altogether, this results in a drop in force output, even if your nervous system is still sending strong signals to the muscle, which explains why, as you're doing more sets, you begin to feel weaker and weaker. Right, on to calcium ions, the thing which all science-based lifters seem to fantasize about and try to slip into every single conversation, and here's why. Calcium is absolutely critical for muscle contraction. It's a molecular switch that allows actin and myosin to bind. But during fatigue, however, calcium release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum is reduced. Calcium sensitivity of troponin is also lowered in acidic conditions, and the reuptake of calcium ions slows down, meaning incomplete recovery between contractions. The net effect of all of this, you 100% felt all of these things before. The first is fewer active cross bridges, followed by slower, weaker contractions. You typically notice this when you're reaching failure in your sets. And the last is incomplete motor unit recruitment. All of these three things combined explains why in a fatigued state your muscles feel unresponsive or weak. Not just because you're mentally tired, but because your intracellular calcium dynamics are also compromised. Essentially, you have fewer calcium ions within your cells. So fatigue isn't just about burnout. The bigger picture also includes ion imbalances, disruptions, and neuromuscular breakdown, which all converge to limit force production and coordination. Right, so when I'm fatigued, my muscles are slower and weaker. So where does it actually start? That's the thing, fatigue doesn't just come from your muscles, it also starts in your brain. This is called central fatigue. It involves reduced neural drive from the motor cortex into the muscles. In simpler terms, the brain sends weaker signals so your muscles can't generate as much force, even if they're physically capable. The key contributors to central fatigue are neurotransmitter depletion, serotonin to dopamine ratio, and mental fatigue. Starting with neurotransmitter depletion, over time your levels of dopamine and acetylcholine neurotransmitters drop, lowering motivation as well as nerve conduction. And following the drop of dopamine, higher serotonin and lower dopamine levels are associated with feelings of sleepiness and less motivation during endurance activity, essentially explaining why I get tired after a while doing the same thing over and over again. And lastly is mental fatigue. Even non-physical tasks like working or studying can impair subsequent physical performance by increasing the rate of perceived exertion. A small note to add is that in 2018, a study by Makara et al. Showed that 90 minutes of cognitive testing before exercise actually reduced time to exhaustion by over 15%. So when you feel off before a workout, it might not be your muscles, it could be your brain. But don't use that as an excuse not to work or study. Your workouts can always come after. You can still make gains, don't worry about it. As mentioned before, recently fatigue has become a hot topic, especially in the science-based lifting community. Ever since it's been gaining attention, researchers are racing to understand it. I have here some of the most important studies shaping this topic, and we'll take a look at what they have to say about fatigue. The first is from the British Journal of Sports Medicine. You've probably seen that a lot now, where we see the meta-analysis of 192 studies performed by Currier et al. Once again. I did mention this in my low versus high rep video, which you should check out as well. Quick plug. Anyways, this meta-analysis found that moderate to high intensities were the most effective for strength, regardless of fatigue level. This alluded that training's failure wasn't necessary if volume was matched, highlighting that fatigue can be manipulated intelligently. The second study was from Smith et al. In the Journal of Applied Physiology. They found that peripheral fatigue, fatigue in the muscles, and central fatigue in the central nervous system don't always occur together. In fact, strength athletes' central fatigue was the limiting factor more often than local fatigue. And lastly, we have a study looking at RPE and fatigue. This study found that RPE track in real time was more predictive of performance drops than heart rate or HRV. And as well as this, it was found that subjective fatigue, what you feel, correlates surprisingly well actually with actual neuromuscular function. The science bros actually have some credibility for once. Fatigue isn't just one thing, it's a layered system. Just because you feel okay doesn't mean your nervous system is fully recovered. And just because your muscles feel sore doesn't mean your CNS is hot. Managing fatigue is becoming the foundation of smart programming, everyone. How do people know when they are truly fatigued? Here is how athletes and coaches are doing it. The first and foremost option, as well as the most realistic and most likely the only available option for most people watching, me included, as well as the only ones who will probably ever use, are subjective tools. These are things you've already seen or heard of, but things like the RPE scale, where you use a simple 1 to 10 scale to assess how hard you pushed. Another is questionnaires to track sleep, mood, and stress, and how the workout actually feels, which can help you predict and prevent risky training practices. On to the next is objective tools. The first is a HRV, heart rate variability. Low HRV indicates stress and fatigue, whilst a high HRV means recovery readiness. You also have isometric pulse or jump tests, which are also reliable markers of neuromuscular fatigue. Following this is velocity-based training, essentially just measuring bar speed. Slower reps means possible CNS fatigue. The last method, and the one used by elite level athletes, are blood and biomechanical markers. A measure of creatine kinase can help as high creatine kinase indicates muscle damage, and cortisol to testosterone ratios are used as they are hormonal stress markers used in high performance environments. The key is just to look for patterns. One bad sleep or hard workout doesn't mean you overtrained, but consistent trends, dropping bar speed, poor sleep, and rising RPE could be a sign that a deload is needed. Finish off with a quick summary. The main ways to manage and mitigate fatigue is to have structured training. Going to the gym based on intuition can work, but eventually you will face problems which may require the help of having a structured routine to help you break through those plateaus, which you can also find on my channel, by the way. The next is making sure your nutrition is right. Just make sure to eat your carbs and protein to replenish your energy stores and to also enhance your muscle protein synthesis. The last and most important in the context of fatigue is pretty obvious, and that is sleep, as that is where the real recovery and magic takes place. The better sleep you have, the better recovery. Anyways, that's it for today, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. Any other recommendations, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Train hard.